Okay, I have to say a huge thanks to you, and that this podcast exists because of you. And the Mental Fitness Blueprint is the most personal thing I've ever created, so it felt right to offer it here first to all of you. The first 50 founding members will shape what this becomes. So if you want to be part of the first 50, details are in the show notes or at mchampagne.com. Who are you, Matt?
I'm the world's most interested guy.
I love that.
I'm certainly not the most interesting, but I do think I am the most interested. I find interest in the most minutia of things, and I just find that that's been a great way to navigate my life and career, which is kind of like, I don't know, stopping and watching an amazing shoe shine guy, to observing chefs, to kind of paying attention to people that are good at what they do. I don't know. It's this time of year. I'm sure you see that in Canada. Like on Saturday, I just found myself and I've seen it a million times, but just watching geese in V formation fly north. It's just like, I really take the time to kind of witness and stop and look and observe. And I think my whole career was kind of built off of that action.
Where do you think that curiosity and that presence stem from? I mean, I know a little bit about your dad and your mom and their backgrounds and so forth, but was that instilled through your upbringing?
I think my dad was a great observer.
Yeah.
He was a commercial artist, and I was very visually driven. And I have very vivid memories of him sort of stopping me and saying, like, check this out. Okay. And it could have been abstract and obscure, or like a piece of architecture, or a great sandwich, or, it's just like, yeah. I think that really came from my father. And also I was interested in it, right? Like, I leaned into that kind of behavior.
When did you first pick up a camera? Is that where it all started for you?
Yeah. My dad, like I said, my dad was a commercial artist. He was a great illustrator, and he was a sign painter, and he was a very, very good amateur photographer. And okay. I think he sensed my frustration of expression. Like, I still can't draw. My printing is horrible. Like, my brother got that skill set.
Okay.
And I think he sensed that frustration. And I remember he gave me like a little Kodak 110 camera. And he was like, I don't know, find your point of view here. And then that graduated. Yeah. And then I loved that. And then he gave me one of his old Pentax SLRs with a 50 millimeter 2.8 lens on it. And I was inseparable from that thing. Yeah. And also I realized it opened up such an amazing world for me. And this is not a new story, but if, that camera opened doors, created friendships. I was, in high school, I was the yearbook photographer, and, I was at sporting events, and, clumsily finding my way into kind of falling in love with, high school crushes and things. And the camera was the conduit for that. And then when I went to start applying to university, I really wanted to pursue photography and art history. And so I applied, and I remember my father sitting me down saying, and this is 1985. Okay. And he was like, Matt, photographers are a dime a dozen, like how do you know that this is what you want to do, and this is what you want to pursue, and this, how you could potentially be successful at this? And I said, I don't know. I really like it, and I think I'm good at it, and that's what I want to do. And he was like, well, that's all I can expect. That sounds pretty good to me. And I applied to 3 schools, all for photography and art history: Syracuse, the Newhouse School, Boston University. They had a very good photojournalist course, and RIT in Rochester. And RIT gave me a big giant chunk of change to go there. And my family was like, that's where you're going.
That's where you're going.
And that was the right decision. I loved being in Rochester. I loved RIT. It was just far enough from Binghamton. Loved the people that I met there. It was a great place to go to school. And then they had an amazing exchange program where you could go to Salzburg in Austria for 1 academic year, like your junior year. All the credits and everything transferred very easily. And I applied to that, and If you've ever seen The Sound of Music, the castle, the Schloss Leopoldskron, they
Mm,
are. That's where my school was, like in the stables of that.
okay.
It was just a magical place to go to school and, studying European art history and photography. And the school was structured where on many weekends they would have these photo workshops with European photographers. I had a girlfriend who was American who was at the Syracuse program in Florence, which was conveniently an overnight train trip from Salzburg. And I just explored my European self there. And I was just in Salzburg last month, and it just like the flood of like great memories, impressions that came from that year abroad was pretty magical.
Mm,
Then I came back to RIT, graduated with a BA, and then moved to New York thinking I wanted to get involved with the art world. And that kind of was not the right timing, and it was not the right choice when I look back. But I started photo assisting, and mostly with alumni. There was an amazing alumni system. So, I was working in studios in Soho with still life photographers shooting Sony campaigns. And like, I just thought it was like the most fantastic world to be in, at $85 a day and all the stale bagels I could bring home.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it was a really great journey, that postgraduate part of my life in New York.
And then if I'm getting my history correct, I mean, at one point that leads in a way, what you're doing present day into the magazine world and
Yeah.
travel. And I'm not sure. What I don't know is how much photography you're still doing personally, or has that evolved, or did you have a
Yeah.
50 mil with you while you're out in Europe?
Well, that part of my life has evolved. Like
Yeah,
photography, again, was a great conduit that opened doors to kind of great opportunity, people, learning, travel. Um, and I was really good at working that. And
yeah,
all I really cared about was working in magazines and working for magazine editorial. And after assisting, that's what I did. And then I got into commercial work where that kind of started paying the bills. But my passion was still like, if I had an opportunity to have like a real commercial paying job or shoot like a portrait for Vanity Fair, I would take that portrait for Vanity Fair
sure.
foolishly every single time. And because I just loved being around the people creating magazines and being a part of that
Why?
energy.
Yeah,
I
what?
mean, the 90s in the editorial magazine world were just, you had, first of all, they had tons of money. It was kind of a free for all. There was just eccentric, incredible characters behind the scenes, from
Mm,
people like Andre Leontali at Vogue to Graydon Carter at Vanity Fair. And I just loved being around all this kind of mad creatives. But as digital was changing the landscape, and I've told this story a million times, right? As digital changed the landscape and how photography was perceived as a craft, I was like, writing's on the wall here, man. Like, there's 10 guys behind me with a digital camera and understand Photoshop. And
yeah,
there's this great democracy of craft where you didn't have to know how to go to a lab and communicate and all. And I just was like, oh my God, like the playing field is going to be leveled
yeah.
really, really soon here.
Did you
So
tell Kodak that by any chance?
I know,
They
like,
seem
look at
to,
that. Like growing
right?
up in Rochester, Bausch and Lomb, Kodak, everything starts imploding. Then I saw the magazine world beginning to change. The commercial world started to change. Day rates got cheaper. Digital stuff started being brought in house. I just knew like things were going to rapidly change. So, but I felt that my ideas, my perceptions, my observations were more valuable than my photo skills.
Okay.
And that's when I kind of graduated and evolved into this kind of editor side of things. I had a quick little spell working on television, which was amazing, like master class on how to create a TV show. Like that was just so great.
Mm,
And then that was short-lived. And then I started working at Condé Nast as the men's editor because my wife was the creative director there. And that was great because I was able to exercise that part of my brain of like creating editorial ideas, working with photographers that were friends that I really loved and cherished, understanding the craft. And that was a lot of fun. I was like, great. And I don't have to schlep around 30 pounds of cameras. It's just fantastic.
yeah.
And but it kind of brought me into all those worlds I loved because of being a photographer. So I still shoot. I carry a Leica digital Q with me most of the time.
Sure.
I use my iPhone probably most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, when we first started with the magazines, which that was part of the evolution of, I better change what's going on here, or, I don't know what we're going to do. It was like, if we couldn't get it shot, I would photograph it. We couldn't get it written, Yolanda would write it. It's like we were super scrappy with that. And I still shoot, and I still do a lot of stuff for Yolanda on the kind of back end of stuff. None of the sexy stuff, trust me.
Okay. Okay.
And
She's shooting, right? Is she shooting a lot of her photographs?
Yeah, Yolanda is
Yeah.
such a good photographer. And when I first sensed how great her eye was, I bought her a Leica,
Okay.
and she was just like paralyzed by that camera because you needed technical aptitude. And then I bought her like a little Contex point and shoot. And then I was like, okay, that's great, because that's all you had to do. And the quality was really good. But now with the iPhone and how quick that could be and how that technically regulates and makes pictures look better and whatever. I mean, it's brilliant. She's so good. Yeah.
But I feel so. I have a chapter in my life as well, probably more of a side thing, but I also dabbled in. Well, for me, you more than dabble, but I dabbled in photography and shot some. We were shooting weddings and different street work and so forth, and did some work in Africa with Photographers Without Borders and so forth.
Oh,
And
cool.
the only reason I share that is that I think you appreciate this, is that I think at least the gift of photography, even if you're not picking up whatever the standard camera is that you can never not see the photo anymore. Yeah. Right.
It's true.
And it's just this beauty and presence.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Like, you're so absolutely right. Like, I am always framing my world in a 35 millimeter lens. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I still say that to this day. I will say to Yolanda, like, look at that. Look at the light. I do that at the farm all the time, where, I've spent 22 years there, and still I'm amazed when like a beam of light comes through clouds on a snowy day up there. I'm like, look at that. It's just, and, I think my daughter Clara, with no impulse of mine, from me, like, has taken on photography, and she's so good at it. And I guess it's just, it kind of becomes part of your DNA, maybe. I think, I was talking to my friend Stephen Lewis, who photographed that watch book.
Okay.
Who's a brilliant photographer, amazing still life photographer. And we've known each other a long time. We started assisting together. And we were looking, I was working in the studio with him doing something for the magazine, William Brown and W.M. Brown. And we both looked at it and we were like, nah, it's not that. It's not right. And then I paused and I was like, why do we know that?
Yeah. What is
why
it?
do we know that? And that is developing a visual language, right? And then like he moved the martini glass, an
eighth of an inch,
centimeters, right? Yeah. And you're like, that's it. And I look at him, he's like, yeah, that's it. And I was like, Steve, how brilliant is that we know that, and we know that together. And I think that, again, it's developing language.
Yeah. But Matt, this is where, so I haven't told you this yet, but one of the big reasons, of course, we've got some mutual connections and so forth, but one of the big reasons I was so excited that we're able to line up this interview is after I watched your episode of Huckberry Homes, which is, for listeners, I mean, I've had Kate on, who does a lot of their series, does the Huckberry Dirt series and so forth. So we've had that conversation recently. What struck me was all of the way that you're going through the home, with the way you're describing, I think, some of your routines and so forth, and what's important to you they're very tactile in a fast-paced world where you're slowing down to make a drink, right? And like, it's the ritual of that experience. Or if I think of the watch or the book I'm holding up, A Man and His Watch, I mean, even as I was waiting for you to dial in, I mean, I pulled it out of the slipcase, and like the fact that it's tactic, like you can feel the book. And again, like obviously we're recording this digitally, and there's great technology everywhere. But I think, I think it's a real superpower moving forward in today's world, where if you can slow down and have these experiences and just like connect with yourself, connect with your surroundings, see the beam of light, I think that gives a massive leg up where around so many others that are just on autopilot.
Hmm.
And it's hard, it's easy, I should say, to fall under or on autopilot with everything that's moving so quickly. And I don't know, I think we deserve more as humans.
Well, listen, I love the digital space. Now, I don't have tons of aptitude, but like I love my phone. I love Instagram. I love getting information, looking things up, translating things. I love it. It's just brilliant. But it doesn't really, as much as probably Yolanda, my wife, would be like, all you do is like watch like monkey video reels. Like, what are you doing with your life? But I do think it's important to take a step back and be as analog as possible. And that analog is about kind of waking up in the woods and, you know, watching the world come alive. That analog is like, in Japan, there's so many beautiful handmade things. You pick
Yeah.
up this like Tony gave us all these. Our mutual Tony
Yeah.
Conrad gave us all these like ceramic sake cups. Not one was the same, and
Yeah.
there's such beauty in that. In the Watch book, we talk about patina and wear and how great that is. How it is better than polished and shiny. In many
Yeah.
cases. And I grew up with craftsmen and including my mom who had a beauty shop and she was a beautician and like creating art out of nothing. It's like will always be a part of my life as much as we immerse ourselves in this AI world, which I think is a very good tool. There's great tools. I think the iPhone, as much as I loved shooting photographs on my Leica M2 with a little manual meter, man, it's so great to pick up that iPhone and at low light and just be like, boom, like
Yeah.
capture the moment, right?
For
The
sure.
decisive moment. Like that is a great thing. But it also is nice to pick up a black and white fiber paper print or look at an Ansel Adams where, it's like hours of zone system printing and just be in awe of that in terms of its analog process. It's a
Yeah.
balance. It's a total balance. And I don't romanticize about those days of shooting film. I'm so happy I don't have to stress about that. But there are other things in my life that are better because they're handmade.
Well, and I think I mean, just to bring, I think, listeners up to speed to who may not know what you do now. I mean, when it comes to a lot of your work, they are things that you can hold in your hand. I mean, think of the
Mm.
magazine, obviously, William Brown, and then of course your wife in YOLO magazine. I mean, there's just like holding that in your hand and taking a minute to appreciate
Yeah.
how that feels and what you're reading and so forth. I have to ask though, even at the time, because it seems like, of course, you're quite present and know what's going on in the world and so forth. To go and step out and say, "Hey, let's do a print magazine." Was that a hell yes, or was that
Yeah.
scary, or like,
No,
you know?
that's all I knew how to make. That's all I knew how to do. Like
Okay.
I said, we know how to make magazines. Let's just make a magazine. And also, I'm a good student. So I had watched businesses double down when, you know, they weren't supposed to be doing that thing they were double downing on and finding a lot of success in that. And I felt like I know we're good at it. Let's double down. Let's as the world that we grew up with and fell in love with, legacy print media was stepping back and dialing down and making, in my opinion, not really good versions of their things. I
Yeah.
said, let's make a beautiful version of this thing that's evergreen. Nothing irritated me more when I was at Condé Nast Traveler and on the masthead they put, please recycle this magazine.
Oh,
I was like, what? Hold
what?
on to hold on to this magazine. Put it in a pile. Like when I was a kid, I would go over to my cousin's house with just like piles of like GQs and Vogues and Vanity Fairs and from for decades of like looking through that stuff. It was just so great. I was so mad at that. I was like, no, hold on to it, give it to somebody, leave it on the back of the toilet. Like I don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was the philosophy with that. Like we wanted to create a print only object that was an object that you would gravitate to, hopefully keep, admire, want to touch. Da, da, da. And then digital entities. developed. Yolanda's website is incredibly successful. The Substack that I write is, a kind of newsy version of the magazine in terms of it's relevant digitally. But, when I did the books too, we were like, how do you create just beautiful objects? If you don't care about watches, what are you going to gravitate maybe to this object, this book, because it's pretty and it's designed well? And you can be
Yeah.
like, well, I don't like watches, but Tom likes watches. Let's buy this book, So that was a very conscious decision. And that came from my upbringing in certainly understanding my father's commercial art career, being in photography and design, growing up with amazing art directors in the magazine world, and gleaning a little bit of that information and understanding in how I really wanted these books to look. And Artisan, so my publisher, are just brilliant. Like, they were incredibly supportive of that idea and gave me the opportunity to do that.
Well, I mean, I don't need to tell you this. It clearly works. I mean, even I'm someone that's interested in the content in the book of, especially with the watches. Something that my first health tech app was based on this watch I'm wearing today, a Nomos Metro, all of the color schemes. So, and whatnot. So, I mean, I have a bit of a biased perception when it comes to, mechanical things, I guess you can say. But what I'll say is I've had this on the coffee table, which I assume is probably where you want it to be. And so many people pick it up that they don't care at all about watches. And next thing you're flipping through, hey, well, what's this all about? And so it's beautiful, just experience. Then it sparks a conversation, and it's just this beautiful ripple effect of, again, something that, and I'm not hating against digital. Of course, I use everything, but you pick something up, it feels different, and you have a conversation. Like, it doesn't get any more human than that. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you. That's a very good observation. And that was its intent. And it was, the format of the book was like more intimate, like bring that into bed with you and like read a story, read a watch story before you go to bed, like, and so I'm working on watch 2 now.
Oh, awesome.
And that came out of, I think, the necessity of wanting to give people more opportunity to read these fascinating stories of people who love watches. And the book was always intended to be driven emotionally rather than like the monetary value of watches. It was about what is the emotional value that these things bring to or potentially bring to people's lives. And so I convinced my publisher. They were like, number 2 doesn't ever do well. And I said, okay, come on. Godfather 2. Very good.
Exactly.
Jaws 2.
Yeah.
Very good. Meatballs 2, if you're going in the 80s, not so great.
Sure.
But like, there's some great 2s out there. Yeah. And I think we could probably be successful at that. So we're doing it. We're doing it right now.
I love it. I want to come back to something you said about doubling down, and bring you back to maybe some of the early days, and even those listening that, whether it's magazines or other things, just there's a lot of people, I think, that are starting new projects in general. I mean, somewhat a necessity. The jobs are being cut and being replaced and automated and so forth. But then also that leaves opportunity. There's a lot more people making things and using their creativity. But if you go back to your early days, of course you knew what it takes to physically create a magazine, but like, where do you even start to bring in? You can create it, but people have to buy it or know about it.
Well,
like how did you start?
Mark, there is the lesson. Because we knew how to make a magazine. I knew how to find a printer. I know how to get it printed. We knew how to lay it out. We had a very clear vision and design. How we're going to pay for it. That's something you got to think about.
Yeah, that's true.
and how are you going to get it to market? So the paying thing, we figured out. We knew we needed X amount of dollars to get whatever 5,000 copies made. Those are hard costs.
Yeah.
And since, Yolanda had really lost her job and my freelance career was evolving, the books were doing well. Like, we had fiscal responsibility on like, how are we going to do this in a smart way and not tap into savings?
Yeah. And how old was your daughter at that time too? You would have.
Clara was just in junior high school.
Okay. Yeah. So real You got to watch what you're doing.
Yeah, like we had a responsibility, and she was in
Yeah.
private school.
Yeah.
Okay, private school in Brooklyn was like a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of watches, and I was like, well, and I hate selling watches. And I was like, well, I know some of these watches I didn't pay a lot of money for are now valuable. I could do that. I could let that
Mm.
go to parlay this into something else. And I parked my 16 love of my life Land Rover LR4 in front of our house in Brooklyn. So pleased with myself that I found parking. And that night at 2 a.m, a London Plains tree broke off in half from the weight of a storm. It was just saturated, and it fell down the middle of one car on First Street, and that was my Land Rover. It totally crushed the car, and I woke up in the middle of the night. It sounded like a shotgun went off, and I walked out, and I was like, "Oh my God, Yolanda! Like, there's a tree down the middle of the car." She was like, "What?" And I remember she came out in a robe. She looked at it and she was like, "I'm going to bed. Like, there's nothing we can do here." The fire department came, cut all this off. I called my insurance adjuster. The next day, I mean, literally, everything was trimmed off the car, and there was just like a body of the tree in the middle of this Land Rover LR4.
Straight out of a movie.
Yeah, it was crazy. No other car on the block was damaged. And my insurance adjuster is there, and he's got his computer out, and the city comes by with a crane to pick the tree up. They pick up the tree, and the crane slips, and the tree falls back on the car.
Oh, come on.
It was like a cartoon, like the wheels were like, went like, you know. And I looked at the insurance adjuster, and he was like, "We're going to total this car." Yeah. And he cut me a check for the full value of the car.
Okay.
And I walked into the house, and I said, "This is how we're going to pay for the magazine. Wow. We're going to take a big chunk of this. We're going to find another car. Yeah. But here's the magazine right here." Wow. So that's how we paid. That's really how we paid for it. Then the distribution aspect was a steep learning curve because we really didn't have it. And we wanted to be really unconventional. I didn't want it to be in, no offense to Barnes & Noble, but I wanted it to be in more boutique-y, mom and pop, more tactile kind of independent bookstores and retail. So that was my strategy. I would call my friends at Drake's and say, "Listen, will you carry the magazine and I'll funnel people to you?" And I don't know, maybe they walk out with a necktie or a suit or whatever. Or I'd go to the independent magazine stores in New York, like Iconic, and say, "Here's my magazine." Of course, they love all that stuff. And we'd work out a wholesale price. And then we were mailing everything through the United States Post Office. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. One Christmas we had a credit at a hotel in LA. We took a suite. I said, "Just make sure there's a printer in there." And we spent most of Christmas mailing that magazine out. Okay, fast forward, we have a distributor, we have better printers, we've sorted it out. But that's how it started. It was very, very
boots on the ground.
Yeah, it was very Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah. Wow. And how many years has it been now?
So that first issue was 2019. Think this issue in spring I think it's issue 22 is coming out. So, and Yolanda was right behind me.
Yeah.
As soon as we did B.M. Brown, she went right into Yellow Journal. So
it's so cool. I mean, I know I've seen articles that reference as the power creative couple, but I mean, it's got to be fascinating. Just. You're both surrounded by the same or similar industry, let's just say. And I mean, obviously, I think you guys met, right?
Yeah, we met in like 96. Yolanda was working for Guess Jeans. My friend was shooting the campaign. It was just a random, they were in town for a photo shoot, and that's how we met. And Yolanda was in LA. I was still shooting. I convinced her to move to New York. We swiftly got married, but we were working together since day one way or another.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of editorial and commercial work, bouncing ideas off of her. She always was so great at organizing and scheduling. And then obviously Yolanda had a very big creative point of view and she was working Condé Nast Traveler, and then she was the photo editor at you. And we just always were bouncing ideas against, each other, not enabling each other too. It's like, it's good to have a critical thinker in your life to, punch holes in ideas. I do think that's really important. Of
Yeah.
course, I was always coming up with these fantastical ideas, and Yolanda to be like, "No, that's not
Yeah.
good."
I heard her reference you as the eternal optimist at one
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah. But it's nice to like even when I was in art school, I loved the critique. I thought critiques were just great time. It was great time spent with critique. I think critique only makes you better.
Of course.
I think when people challenge you and challenge your ideas, that is a great way to make ideas better. And
Yeah.
I think some people get offended when people have strong opinions. And I think we may be in a generation that's easily offended by strong opinions. But
Yeah.
I always valued strong opinions. Even if I disagreed, I thought it was interesting to have those critiques. And we are very kind of critical of each other's ideas to make them better.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'd love to know a little bit about your any kind of specific routines or way that you work in from when it comes to ideation or creativity and so forth. And maybe we can use it, watch too as an active project. Like if when you have a new project, how, how do you start? Like how do you, I guess maybe a more deeper question, like how do you get your mind to a place where it's clear enough to really think and either plan then the steps out or what you need to do? Like, what does all that look like for you?
It always starts with one thing.
Okay.
The watch book started with my story. And it's also helpful if it comes from a personal, emotional space. Like I would say, even when I do the magazine, all of it comes from a very personal interior world.
Okay.
So with the watch book, it came first with my watch story, which was the watch that my father left,
Hmm.
or as I say, took when he died.
Yeah.
So that's where it started. The car book started that same way. It was like that car that Yolanda and I got from her ex-boyfriend to elope in that I ended up owning in a horse trade. It's like that's how it started. It started very, very personal in a very personal way. The Negroni and the Martini book were the sort of the same way, and that came from Artisan. And they said, "Well, listen, we want you to do these cocktail books. Like, what are the drinks?" And I was like, "Negroni and Martini. That's it." They were like, "Well, what about old fashions?" I said, "I like old fashions, but I'm in love with these two things." And so it came from a very personal. When I do the magazine, we have these categories that we kind of punch and fill in.
Yep.
But those categories are always kind of came from a very selfish place of stuff I like, you know,
Hmm.
a great car drive, happy hour, a great drink, a great book excerpt, a style feature that's about real human beings with real style, not models dressed by a fashion brand,
Sure.
because those are the people I personally find inspiration from. Those are the people I get inspiration from. And those are the people that we celebrate in the magazine. And that is a very selfish intent. Like I want to be surrounded by that. So we
But you're not
put
the
it
only one. That's the key.
right. Yeah. And that was also the philosophy of the magazine. I said, hey, listen, I don't need 100% of that audience out there. If we can get 12%, or we could just find 10% the people that like this, I'm fine with that. And that's what happened. And then some. And I think it came from having the magazines, and the books come from very, very personal places.
Yeah.
I always found, and I'm sure somebody will change this, but I always found it's hard to be hypercritical and mean or punch holes and things that come from really emotional beginnings. Like if you're like I love Labatt's beer. Like
Okay.
all you microbrew lovers out there can beat me up all you want, but that was the first beer that was pulled from a tap in a pub in upstate New York with my grandfather, and I always love it.
Yeah.
So you can't take that away from me.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the stories that we do in the magazine come from those kind of connections. I'm not ever saying I'm an expert. I'm not. I'm just
Sure.
deeply enthusiastic about this stuff.
And when you're, again, I don't know you well, or have just been kind of put into your ecosystem fairly recently, but I'm making the assumption that you spend a lot of time traveling, and I think that's probably part of the work as well. Then there's home base, of course. So when you're home and maybe when you're away, like what are some of the non-negotiables for you when it comes to whether those are routines or things that, again, keep your mind clear and healthy? Because I just, the reason I ask this question is that I've just noticed that when we're super stressed, our mind is just fully at capacity. It's hard to make good decisions. It's hard to see new projects. It's hard to, to come up with, especially in a creative space, come up with something that really resonates well with you and as well as others from that place. So I'm always interested to see people's routines on like, how do you blow out some of that mental clutter and keep the mind healthy?
I think sleep is really important.
Yeah.
I like, I'm very, very social, but I'll look at my watch and start counting backwards sometimes, where I'm just like, I got to go to bed now. And Yolanda's like, where are you going? I was like, I got to go to bed now. Because I know
Yeah.
I have a day that starts here, and I
Yeah.
just need to go. I also like the ritual. I like the morning ritual of making I love drip coffee. Tony
Yeah.
hates that, but like I love that morning starting with that cup of coffee and thinking what's going on. But here's the key. Here's the number one thing. I like to be out and about. I am a field agent. I'm much better in the field. I
Interesting.
am not good in an office. My tolerance for sitting at a desk is so minimal, and it frustrates my team, my wife. But like, I'm just like, I gotta go. Like, they're like, where are you going? I said, I don't know. Like, I'll go to the post office, and I don't know. I'm gone. Like, why did it take an hour to buy stamps? Because I was out there exploring other stuff, or I ran into somebody that I enjoyed talking to, or I wasn't paying attention and I made a left and I should have made a right, and it brought me to something that I discovered that I know I'd be able to use. What's great about the magazine is everything or the potential of many things that I could discover can get turned in to the content of that
Mm,
magazine, can be brought into a world that we can amplify with
yeah.
a voice. That to me is such a gift. And that could be like, you know, a great egg salad sandwich becomes, part of the sandwich section in the magazine, or, running, some mad vintage car parked on the side of, a street in the West Village can evolve into a car story. Running into somebody randomly on the street can develop into a kind of big editorial point of view on, and that is why I think I like to wander. I think it was Kurt Vonnegut. Yolanda read a quote and she's like, this is so you, about how he would say to his wife, I'm just going to go out and buy an envelope. And he'd be gone like most of the day.
Yeah.
That's definitely me, because I love exploring. When I first moved to New York, I had this red Raleigh Roll Fast coaster brake bicycle. I was on that bike nonstop. If I wasn't working, if I was a freelancer and I was trying to scrape up, in the beginning, trying to find work, and if I wasn't working that day, I was on that bicycle just exploring New York.
Mm,
And I think I did hundreds and thousands of miles on that bike, just exploring stuff. And that was valuable intel for me, because I knew I was capable of somehow turning it into something, even a reference that I needed in a creative meeting, to actual content and stories, and that became storytelling. But for me, it's important to be out and about,
yeah. But
field
this
agent.
comes full, as you're saying all this, it makes so much sense, and how you answered the, coming full circle, the first question. I mean, this is living as the interested human,
Yeah,
right? And I think I don't see any downside to that. I mean, it's living through curiosity, which just naturally pulls you into the present moment, which I think has just so many benefits across, no matter what you're doing personally and professionally, right? And again, I keep
yeah.
coming back because a lot of the work that I do a lot of mental fitness work with corporate
Mm.
teams and trying to get people's minds to work for them instead of against them. And this is one way that everyone has access to
Oh, yeah.
tap into that. Right? You don't have to go on a 14-day silent retreat to do this.
No.
You do it right where you live.
Yeah. And, when I was working as a photographer and working with these young assistants, they always would say to me, like, well, how am I going to break into this business? Like, how am I going to, I want to be a travel photographer. Like, how do I build this portfolio? And I was like, you don't need a trip to Bangkok or Paris to create a travel portfolio of
Yeah.
your point of view of imagery. I would always say, like, go to your hometown and shoot a travel story. Because we always knew what the formula, what those stories were, right? There was
Yeah.
some food stuff and people and vista and landscape, and go do that. If you can create an editorial point of view if I could do it in Binghamton, New York, you could do it in Cleveland,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think, go do it. And they were like, I never really thought about that. You don't need access to what you think is the exotic, or, it's just, it's all in front of you. You just need to open up your eyes and see it, and for some reason I tapped into that really early and understood that it's just what I liked. It lent itself to really opening up my point of view and my observations, and the receivership, I think, is really important, right? To
What do you mean?
be being able to receive this information,
Oh,
like
yeah.
keeping your eyes open, like be as optimistic like, what's out there that I can receive in terms of inspiration and observation and, learning. I think
There's a
about that.
question that you can ask daily that leads you in a beautiful place.
Yeah,
Imagine everyone asked that question, how much I think how more connected we would feel, I think, to ourselves as well as others,
yeah,
just starting the day. Like, what can I receive today? Like, and just, and everything, like, this is a great cup of coffee, and like
yeah,
smelling it and tasting
yeah.
it, instead
This
of,
is great. And also, like, I live on the Upper East Side now, which is such an interesting place to live because it's really a very old school neighborhood. Brooklyn was filled with lots of transient New Yorkers, but this is like old school New Yorkers. And like, the people I meet here, like, are so interesting and kind of great. And most of them are older.
okay,
But I'm
yeah,
like, look at all that experience and all that cool, like,
yeah, yeah,
I run into crazy people with, like, dogs here because we have a dog and you're in the park. And I always come away with some great anecdote or story or something. And I'm just like, that was so great. Sometimes there's the negative. I mean, this is not always like,
sure,
gilded roses, but,
yeah, yeah,
but I always try to spin it into, like, what do we learn here?
yeah,
What's the lesson? And sometimes that lesson is, it's just a good cup of coffee.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Is there a story that you've always wanted to tell but haven't been able to tell it or find it yet?
That's a good question. You know, I think I tell stories I love the oral tradition of storytelling. I think, uh, I grew up with a lot of Italians. My mother's Italian, and, like, they were great storytellers. And they could spin the most mundane thing into the most dramatically funny, interesting story. I think that's what's great about someone like David Sedaris, right? And I like
Yeah,
him so much. I think the greatest story is a story I haven't told yet, and I don't know, or haven't learned about yet.
yeah,
A lot of things are on repeat. There's similar interests that constantly create different versions of that story. But I don't know. I mean, I come home with stories. I'm sure, like, just bore Yolanda to death. Like, she's like, why is that? You spent all this time telling me, where's the punchline here? It's like,
yeah,
but I think a lot of my stories are based on observation and what do we get from those observations? It's a very good question, but I guess I won't know until I kind of run into that. And I do think my interests I always said, like, nothing is etched in stone. Like, philosophically and in terms of interesting thing, yeah, I'd like very specific things that are on repeat, but that doesn't mean that that's it. I'm interested in, I don't know, I guess I'm interested in things I don't even know I'm interested in yet, maybe,
yeah.
potentially.
Well, I think as you're saying this, I was thinking, in a way, I imagine you're probably always hunting for that that story that, of course, that you've always wanted to tell, and what is it? And I don't think you ever reach that, because you'll go to the next one, right?
Yeah, I
Which is the
hope I don't.
excitement of it,
Yeah,
right?
I hope I don't hit the apex of that.
Yeah,
And I've always said, again, with having talks with Yolanda, and brands coming to you and figuring out how they could have a commercial relationship. And I always felt like the strengths were, I think I'm a good storyteller, and I think I'm good at identifying the kind of blood and guts of a good story. And I don't care if that's like Maytag or a
sure.
restaurant or a hotel property. I'm interested in the historical aspects, in the evolution of storytelling. And I can find the story most of the time because I'm interested in it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I want to, and also it's easy when you like something. It's difficult when you're in business and people come to you and they're like, we want to pay you a bunch of money to tell our story. And you're like, I don't really like what you do.
yeah, yeah,
Like that is tough. It is
yeah,
easier. And we've been very, very lucky to have relationships commercially with brands, and that we've been asked to be storytellers for, that I like. And that is so lucky,
yeah,
you know, to
yeah.
kind of build out the commercial end of this, because, we got to keep the lights on with these things.
Of
And
course.
that requires currency and, commercial relationships. But it is nice when people come to you to collaborate and you love already what they do. And then you can just tell your story based on the perspective of what you like about them. And they're often
Beautiful.
really amazed, like, wow, you like that part? And I'm like, yes, like
Yeah,
your factory in, town X is like so cool and so inspiring. And people would love to know how that stuff is made.
yeah.
And people always are like, really? Oh, yeah. Okay. And I think
It,
if you have enough infectious enthusiasm, people jump on.
well,
you
and
know,
it's just a win-win. It's a win-win. Everyone is excited and, to your point, curious about, the project, and nothing feels forced for the most part.
yeah, that's the
I think of
worst.
I think even here, like, I mean, the sponsors that have been a part of the show, they're never I shouldn't say never, but historically there hasn't been a lot where they're like there's standard reads in here, and they're more collaborations. Like
Yeah.
there's one that there's a sauna partner right now where they're, this episode will be brought to you by Sip Saunas, but we're also doing like a sauna interview project and trying to explore different cultures and how to use saunas,
Oh my God.
you know?
I love sauna. This, what's the name of the sauna sponsor? I got to look this up now.
Yeah, Sip Saunas. Sip,
SI.
SIP, sauna.
Okay. Are
Yeah,
they Canadian company?
they are.
Okay,
They
cool.
are. I'll
Do
send
they
you the
make
link. And
they make prefabricated saunas?
they're not prefabricated. They're made to spec. I mean, they have models, of course,
Yeah.
that are, but they're just handcrafted in a way. And then they're not
It's,
unreasonable, but they're well built.
yeah, it's so funny you talked about that, because I am on this kick right now. I love saunaing. I have been for years. I think my trips to Middle Europe have done that.
Yeah.
I love being in sauna. Like, I love, my head is so clear. You come out you feel so good.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I love when saunas are outside. Like the Middle European experience is so great when I go visit friends in Austria or Switzerland, and they're like, "Yeah, let's go outside. Let's go have a sauna." And you're like, "This is
Yeah.
so great." And I was talking to another small, like, kind of mom and pop manufacturer that was fed to me on Instagram of like outdoor saunas. And it's amazing what's happening in the American culture right now. They're really forward thinking
Oh,
with,
yeah.
like, there are so many saunaing things going on right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic. I think it's
Yeah.
so great. And like, nobody brings their phone into the sauna because it
No.
fries. You can sit there in silence, or you can start conversation. I love, again, like, I just love the way I feel. I love often the alone isolation of the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. That's so
Well,
cool.
in like, in a way, like I think of again how we initially connected, or how I came across your work. I mean, what we want to do is almost a version of like what you experienced with Huckberry Homes, like show people, interesting things about people's homes. In this case, it's how you're used, because some people use sauna in completely different ways. There's obviously therapeutic benefits. There's people that use it for, thinking and clearing their head. There's people that bring food in different cultures. And so just let's have a chat about it. And what I love about the owner of this company, because there's a sauna coming this way, and we had a big chat about, do you get like the electric version with the rocks and so forth, or wood stove? And obviously it takes longer and so forth to heat up. But he's like, this isn't even a question in Europe. Of course you get a wood stove. I mean, that the ritual of lighting the fire. And Matt, it hit me so like right in the middle of the eyes. Like, yes, slow down. Like, what's going to take 20, 30 minutes to get a good fire going? But what? Instead, I can turn it on my phone. I mean, just slow down and come back to, again, the tactical part. And guess what? I found an axe that my dad had, who was passed maybe about 10 years ago. And like, I can't wait to use that axe.
Oh, that's so cool.
So
yeah, that's so cool. I mean, that gets back to our conversation of ritual and what's so nice about ritual, and how it does force you to be thoughtful, or it doesn't work, right? Like, that's making good coffee or a nice omelet or stoking a fire. It requires thoughtfulness, and you can't rush these things.
Yes.
You can't rush a good barbecue for a steak. You can't rush it. As much it is, I have an infrared sauna in my house in upstate New York. It is nice to be able to go click, but it still takes a half an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
It still requires time and patience, and it isn't immediate, and it shouldn't be. But I do think, listen, there are things that I want with immediacy. Like, I love when Dante put Negronis on tap. And I was like, wow, I could fast track my favorite drink, flawlessly in moments. I was like, that's an amazing innovation. But then again, there is something wonderful within the ritual of slowly stirring that drink, bringing the dilution up correctly, and, finding the ritual in the routine.
Well, I think, and if you had that tap up in your home in upstate New York, I feel like it'd be probably interesting for a while, but then you'd get kind of, I want to make it,
I think it'd be like, I think it'd be a problem is the problem.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. It's nice to kind of take your time with it. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the ritual.
Yeah. Matt, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
And I thank you, of course, for making time to come on the show, but a higher thank you, and just the energy and effort that you put into the work that you put out into this world. Because I think, of course, people enjoy your stories and so forth, but I think there's even a bigger ripple effect of holding one of the books, slowing down, or being inspired by, a write-up or whatever you're covering and so forth, that then leads to a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful, I think, result of a lot of your work. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for the hard questions and the thoughtful impressions. I really appreciate it.